Hey, what's up, guys? Rideshare Guy here, and today I've got a little bit of a different video for you. We're going to be walking through a spreadsheet that basically helps drivers calculate their taxes, calculate their actual profit, calculate their losses, things like that. So I actually came across a guy named Bill Tesaro over on Reddit, and he pinged me about a spreadsheet that he had made that's actually pinned over on Reddit, our Uber drivers, and it's one of the top posts over there. And basically, what it is he inputs all of his earnings data every single day, reconciles it every single week, and then shares it so that people like you and I, and anyone who's basically really interested in the numbers and calculating things like how much you're actually earning and figuring out your expenses. So, if you're interested in that, this is definitely something you should check out. If you're a beginner driver, I might hold off on this video, maybe come back at a time when you've got the ropes, got the hang of things a little bit more after a month or two, and you really want to start thinking about how much you're earning and how much you're making. You can actually use a copy of his spreadsheet. You can download it. I'll leave a link in the show notes below. Check it out. And this video, though, I'm going to interview him, and he'll share his screen, actually, and kind of go over his spreadsheet. Now, a little bit of it got cut off for some reason, so you can see on the left-hand side. A little bit was cut off, but it still is, still good information, and we'll spend a lot of time going over everything from your profits and kind of how to enter your data from Uber, from Lyft, what's important. And we really cover a lot of interesting topics. And, if you really do have an interest in running your rideshare gig kind of like a real business, this is a great video because it really gets into the nitty gritty, and there's a lot of math involved, and it's a bit complex in that respect. But if you guys are interested in it and you want to practice and get better and kind of understand how much you're actually earning, definitely recommend you check it out. So without further ado, let's see what Bill has to say. So Bill, why don't you tell me, so how long have you been driving for?
It'll be about a year coming up in March or April.
Right on, right on. And what's your full time?
So the full time, I'm a corporate tax accountant for a software company out in San Diego, down in Sereno Valley, like right by Qualcomm, but not Qualcomm.
Very cool, very cool. So I used to live in San Diego for 10 years, so I think I might have mentioned that to you, so I'm
Yeah.
very familiar with that area. But cool, so yeah, so we're looking at your sheet right now, and so first, describe your sheet to me, or for someone who's looking at it right now and sees a lot going on and a lot of numbers, what would you say, what does this sheet help drivers with?
Okay, so this pretty much helps drivers figure out if they're driving efficiently or not.
Okay.
Because everybody wants to get better at this, and make the most amount of profit.
Yeah.
Maximizing profit.
Definitely.
So I want to help people on a per mile basis get maximize profits, and on a per hour basis.
Right on. Cool.
On a per trip basis, you're on your own because I can't figure out how to make people ping me more. If you can figure that out, then everybody's going to make a lot more money.
Right on. Awesome.
Yeah, and it also helps you track your expenses for IRS purposes. Now, the IRS allows electronic equivalents versus handwriting it in a ledger.
Cool.
And that's exactly what we're doing here, tracking all of your data. So when you go to do your stuff in March, or April, you know exactly where you stand.
Definitely, yeah, and obviously I can give the kind of standard disclaimer. We'll do all this kind of for informational purposes only. Anyone who's using this, remember you're on the internet, so use it, buyer beware, right?
Because I think I know what I'm doing, but
But yeah, I know, and I think so. Yeah, that's why I was kind of excited when you shared this with me, and it's taken us a while to hook up and finally get it done. But I think we're gonna make it happen. We are making it happen right now.
Today.
So you actually posted this on Reddit, and it's now one of the top pinned posts, it looks like. So why don't you walk us through the sheet, maybe kind of give us a brief overview of this page, and we'll quickly go through the others.
So I made the little intro page to kind of explain to it, give a bit of instructions, also add a few links. So people ask me the same basic questions, how is this applicable to my taxes? So I say, everybody has to file a Schedule C and a Schedule of Self-Employment when they receive a 1099. It's just the business of what we're doing here. And so I put in a couple links at the top, and one of the most important ones is the IRS publication 463 that explains the commuting versus business miles. So that's an important one. The other two are instructions. They're basic, like line by line.
Cool.
Then when we go down to the instructions on, I guess, starting on line 23, it's a bit of, how do you enter your info on the Uber and Lyft tabs themselves. It's a little basic setup you have to do, but once you set it up correctly, you kind of just pop it in every day.
Perfect. So what's the type of driver do you think this sheet is gonna help? I mean, do you think this is for everyone or someone who kind of has to be really interested or?
So, sorry. It has to be people that are at least making more than $600 in gross fares.
Okay.
If you're not making more than that, you really don't even have to file a Schedule C or S.
Okay, right on. But I mean, as far as like kind of the knowledge that's required of doing this sheet, do you think like anyone can really do it? Is it pretty simple? Because I mean, looking at it right now, I see a lot, and that's kind of why, when I first looked at this sheet, it was a little bit overwhelming. But I think once we kind of get into it and you explain how it works and what you need to enter, I think a lot of people will probably be able to say, oh, hey, this is actually a lot easier than I thought. And, tracking all this information can actually help me a lot.
Yeah. So for beginners, it's definitely a little difficult, as you need at least one payment statement.
Yeah.
Once you get a payment statement, it'll mirror the payment statement, and it'll make sense. That's why I started putting the payment statements online so people could compare and say, okay, once you figure out how to put the data in one time, two times, the rest will be fine.
Okay.
But even veteran drivers can use it because they may be using other apps, through their iPhone or Android, and those are pretty easy to use, but some people like to take a do-it-yourself approach. So this is more, I guess you could say, for anybody that wants to understand the mechanics of it better.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. So first of all, I like that you color-coded those Lyft and Uber tabs. That's handy. So why don't we walk through the first tab and let's see what you got.
Okay, so let's start with the Lyft tab, which is the pink tab.
Awesome.
Okay. So what you would do is you would start, all the way to the left, let's say column D, okay?
Okay.
For each day, you're going to put in your info. The gross fares will pop right up in your statement. For Lyft, right. I think you get an email versus Uber. You have to check your statement every day.
Yep.
You'll get your daily statement. It'll have gross fares. If you have any primetime fares, which is the Lyft version of surges,
yep.
You would put those in separately from your gross fares, just so you can quantify, okay, I've been doing well with primetime, or no, I'm not.
Yep.
Then we have column F for the miscellaneous, which is cleaning fees. If somebody barfs or they spill booze or anything like that, you're going to get a maybe $50 to $200 fee. You're going to put that in separately because it's Uber takes their fees out of it differently. Actually, Uber doesn't take any fees. Surcharges and tolls may not apply to Lyft particularly. That's more of an Uber thing. Now here's everybody's favorite, the tips that you get driving for Lyft. Those are separate as well because you keep 100% of your tips, so the Uber fees don't come out of that. So
okay, cool.
They'll summarize up into column I, and then column J and K. You can, if you only drive for Lyft versus Uber, this is where you would input your business miles versus your commute miles.
Okay,
that's kind of a qualifying column, meaning you're going to choose if you want to give yourself more business miles or more commuting miles.
Right. And just to quickly explain the business versus commute, that would be like business miles would be while you're on a trip or while you have the app on, kind of driving around looking for fares. And the commuting is if you live, an hour outside the city and drive into the city to drive.
That's perfect. That's exactly how it's described. So the second you turn that app off, when you're on your way home, that's a commuting mile.
Right. You
can take that as a business expense if you want to be aggressive. If not, that's okay with me, but the IRS,
it's kind of I think that's what I mentioned in one of my podcasts. It's one of those gray areas. If you want to take it, you're being aggressive. If not, you're being less. So, okay, cool. So, I mean, it seems like the inputs are pretty straightforward then, kind of the gross, prime time, the surcharges and tolls, the tips, any cleaning fees, and then the miles if you only did Lyft. Are those the only inputs? And then obviously for each day?
So you also have a gas estimate. I put in column M is a per gallon that you pay for the gas. So when you fill up your tank for the shift or even earlier in the day, and it was, let's say, $2.50 a gallon, you would input that, and it will kind of give a really rough estimate for your gas expense to your profit and loss statement, the tab that's at the end.
Very cool.
And it'll just push it there automatically.
Okay, cool.
So then moving to the right a little more, we have the columns to input your hours that you drive. You don't have to be super, exact with this. You can use full hours. You can even use half hours. That's just more for you to make sure you're putting the time you spend on the road as being profitable.
Right on.
That's one of those efficiency measures.
Yeah, definitely.
So the number of trips taken, this one's important as it'll push and automatically calculate the rider fee. So that's, whatever, based on the number of trips you did for the night. Just remember to back out the cancellation fees because those don't count as actual trips.
Okay, that's a good tip, right?
Yeah, because some people might just count up the number of fares for the night. No, if you had two $5 cancellation fees, that's not a real trip. Don't enter that.
Okay. How would you enter a cancellation fee?
So the cancellation fee, you just enter in gross fares as if you earned it, and then there is no trip for it at all. So it would be calculated in the gross fares.
Okay, perfect.
Now, the number of airport fares is actually in addition to the number of trips. So if you've taken 10 trips and 2 of them are airport fares, you would still enter 10 trips in column P, and then 2 trips in column Q.
Got it. And I'm assuming that's for that airport surcharge.
Exactly.
Right.
For the stupid airport.
$4. What is it in San Diego?
$4. Yeah. It's about $3.75 in San Diego.
There we go. Okay, cool.
Moving along to column S is the split fare fee. This is kind of like into the minutiae a little bit. Not as important, but if you want to make sure your numbers gel completely with your payment statement, it's maybe 50 cents for 2 people. I think it's $1 for 4 people. You would input that there.
Okay, cool.
And the rest of the columns will pre-populate. And then what you would do is you would check your payment statement, the total earnings you had for the day, meaning your money, is you would reconcile it with column B.
Okay, perfect. And I think that's an important step to note too, right? Because obviously there's a few different inputs, but you can pretty easily check with your payment statement. So what number needs to match up with which? So the number from your payment statement needs to match up with which column? That total earnings column?
Total earnings column, yes.
All right, perfect. So column V as in Victor. Perfect.
Yes.
Okay, cool. And so once you have that info, what can you do with it, or how do you use it?
So this tab is kind of terrible for showing it because I use the Uber as my main tab.
Okay.
So yeah, when we switch over to Uber, we'll explain the efficiency ratios a little bit better.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's switch over and see what it looks like.
Okay, so now on to the black and white tab for Uber. So this is my main tab because I started with Uber, so I input most of my, pedigree information here.
Okay, and it looks like, so you update this every week too, is that right? Because
I reconcile it every week, but I update it every day.
Oh, wow. Very cool.
Just because, in the winter, not so much. In the summer months, I want to make sure I was kicking ass. The winter, everybody's just, okay, maybe we'll get guarantees at the end of the week, whatever. So anyway, now this tab is very similar. It's just missing a column for tips because we don't get tips as Uber drivers. So you follow the same thing: gross fares, surges, cleaning fees.
Right.
Now surcharges and tolls, we don't have a lot of these by us, but if you drive on toll roads, you will be reimbursed through Uber if you pay for them, or maybe not. Sometimes you don't. If you're trying to think what else. Yeah, just bridges, things like that, tolls. If you have to pay them, maybe they'll kick you back $5.
Yeah.
You would input that in column G of this worksheet.
Yeah. Well, you're supposed to be reimbursed for tolls. It doesn't always happen. So that's why it's good to, that's a good point. That's why it's good to track it on your own, right? Because if you're paying tolls, you want to make sure that you're getting reimbursed. So.
Yeah, and that you do bring up a good point there. So this worksheet also can be used if you need to contact Uber. If you're looking and some numbers aren't working out or you're missing money, you can go back in the past and use this and say, hey, this is what happened, and you can send Uber support,
Yeah. Okay, cool. So it looks like pretty much very similar to the Lyft tab. And
exactly the same all the way across to the total. Okay, so let's scoot across to, so one column I want to note, which I did not in the other tab, was the supplies column.
Mm-hmm.
And this you can put in, any kind of stuff that you buy for the passengers, such as gum, water. You buy some charging cords because people yank them out all the time.
Yeah.
Things like that. If you want, you can input the dollar amount you spend on your phone mount, things like that. It's just mainly to roll up to those other expenses that you would put on your tax form.
Yep. Okay, cool.
Okay. So now over to, let's do the efficiency ratios. This is where all the fun begins now.
All right, let's do it.
Some people, like I said, are more do-it-yourself. They want to understand the mechanics of it.
Mm-hmm.
This is where now you start to get to understand why you're inputting all this data.
Okay.
So for the gross metrics column, which is column Y, Z, and AA, right? So the first column is a per mile. So you drove, I don't know, maybe 100 miles, you made $100.
Mm-hmm.
On a gross level, that's $1 per mile.
Right.
That's pretty good. Okay, everybody wants to do, but there are some days, like as you can see here, where I'm at 36 cents per mile. That's terrible.
Yeah.
But as you said, some people have to spend, an hour or even, let's say 30, 40 minutes to drive to a downtown area.
Yeah.
That's going to affect your earnings. And this is where you can see that and say, okay, maybe I should flick my app on a little earlier and try to get a ride there.
Yeah, good point. Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's a good point. I mean, you could probably test 1 week where, hey, you flick it on and get a few rides sort of along the way and see what your earnings look like, and then the next week you don't, and kind of compare the two.
Exactly. This is comparative analysis.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, a lot of people hate it, but tax accountants, any finance people, everybody's going to go, wow, I love this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even if it's a lot of numbers, and sometimes it could be boring, but if it makes you more money, it's all worth it, right?
That's what the number one key is maximizing profitability. We're all out there. Go. We're going to make a little bit. We're going to make some money.
Yeah.
We want to make sure we're making the most money.
All right, cool. So that's a good one. So going to the right, it looks like you have per mile, per hour, and per trip.
And they follow the same convention. So the per hour, the number of hours you put in, you're going to, for the gross fares, and you're going to say, okay, I made $8 per hour. That's not bad. But you want to, if you're not beating minimum wage, you should probably stop doing Uber.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, even with the guarantees. Now, the one that I hate the most here is the per trip, because there is no way to improve this no matter what you're doing.
Gotcha.
It's just the winter is going to be slow. In the summer, that's going to be your favorite stat. You're going to love looking at that.
Okay. Because
you're going to start getting 25, 30. You're going to get huge trips all over the place.
Yeah, but awesome.
The other two, you can improve. That one, you cannot. So, and one other important note is on the per hour and the per mile. Don't cheat when you input your hours just to make your own numbers look better. Because you may be inclined to do so. You're not helping yourself. This is to help you. You don't have to show anyone this. This is just for yourself. So don't cheat on the hours.
All right.
Because I would like to as well. Okay, and then the next three columns, column AB, AC, and AD, they all have red nose in them. So these will automatically calculate. And if you notice down in the green, if they say yes, that means you're beating your reference average up on the, I guess you would call row 6, which is your daily average.
Mm.
Those highlighted in box numbers are the, I guess the aggregate average as you go.
Gotcha.
It'll go up, it'll go down, but if you're beating your average, that means you're doing better than yourself. That's what you want to do. You want to try to beat those reference numbers week after week.
Okay.
So that's, an important thing is those on top of the gross metrics are those 3 boxes under.
Cool.
Yeah. Then you have, as part of that, beating your average is the percentages. So you can see how bad you did. On the, let's say the week for me of the first week of January there, January 4th to the 10th, I did terrible. You can see all my percentages. They're in the 30s, 40s, 70s. That's bad. When you start beating your own averages, you're going to start seeing percentages over 100%, like you see for the green columns for the second or third week of January there.
Gotcha.
That's just another quantifying measure.
Yeah. So it's a good way to kind of quickly look and see if you had a kind of a good week or a bad week. Basically.
Exactly, yeah. If you're doing 200%, that's good.
Right on. Okay, cool.
Okay, so moving along to the next few columns here under profitability, which is column AH through AK.
Mm-hmm.
These are going to kind of break down your actual dollars that you're making. So you'll get a pre-tax net profit, which is your gross minus Uber's fares,
and
then you'll start there. And then you get your total expenses, which is everything that's getting pushed through your overall expenses that you input, like in supplies and on the profit and loss statement. Like let's say you're changing your tires, things like that. It'll just stretch that dollar amount over the number of days you're driving. So if it's $400 and you're driving for 10 days, that's $40 per day.
Okay.
But as you drive longer and longer, that number goes down, and then you'll, like I said, the total expenses, then you have your tax due, which that'll calculate automatically as well. And then the important column is column AK. That actually tells you, let's say you made 400, or let's say 500 for the day. That's your pre-tax net profit, right? Then you had expenses of $50, tax due of another $50. You're left with $400. That's the actual money, your basic profit that you made, even though you're getting, Uber's sending you whatever their money is, $500. Yeah, that's the money you actually made.
Okay.
that's another. So that's one of those columns that's important to people because some people just see Uber pouring money in their bank. And they're like, oh, awesome, that's great.
Definitely. That's a good point to mention for sure.
You have to account for your gas expenses. Some people separate their personal and business checking accounts, which that's good too. But if you don't do that, this is another way to measure those,
Okay, cool.
Okay. The last column is the same metrics as the gross metrics, just on a net basis.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, and then these two, both of these tabs, the Uber and Lyft tab, will go. Let's wait for the sum page to load. So both of these will be pushed through in total to the summary page.
Okay.
This way, if you drive for both, you can look at them overall and say, okay, this is how much I'm making.
Cool.
This also helps you maybe tweak if you want to drive for Uber more. Say, especially now with the guarantees, it's definitely more profitable to drive with Uber versus Lyft, even though Lyft gives, the power driver bonus and things like that, just because Uber's paying you to sit around and wait.
Okay. So what are kind of the key numbers to look at in your view? Like what should drivers, if they're going to go through and do this analysis, what are the most important numbers to look at?
So the most important numbers, let's scroll over to the right here, and that's the gross metric daily averages.
Okay.
Because a lot of drivers say, like, how much do you actually make?
Yeah.
And it's hard to just say, oh, I make, X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
You want to give people a number. So you say, okay, on a gross basis, because that's what everybody measures their wages on.
Yep.
You're at $1.25 per mile, averaging. You're averaging $35 per hour. Sorry, $1.25 per mile, $35 per hour, and $15 per trip. That's a good way to talk to another driver on an apples-to-apples basis.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, cool. Awesome.
Okay, so now I guess we can move to the last two tabs.
Sure.
Okay, so we can start with the estimated tax tab. So let's wait for this to load. So the estimated tax tab, a lot of numbers actually push to here automatically, so you won't have to do much with this.
Okay.
You will, so we're specifically talking about column D. That's where all the numbers are.
Mm-hmm.
So the pink, anything that's highlighted in pink there or bolded in pink, those are automatic links. You don't even have to touch those.
Got it.
The car loan interest, anything bolded in blue, those you have to kind of finagle with a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if you finance a car versus leasing, so just a note for everyone, don't use Uber's leasing program. It's terrible. Definitely finance a car if you could, if you don't already own one. Because you get a tax deduction for your interest on your car loan, which not everybody knows that, but you get a little deduction there. So that one you're going to have to input. Then you get a deduction for your taxes and fees that you pay for your car.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much the DMV fees. If you have to register, like people in Southern California or even Northern California, we have to pay smog fees every year.
Right on.
And we have to pay pretty high registration. I mean, I paid $200 this year for my car.
Okay.
It's a lot of money. You want to take a deduction for that. And then the big one that everybody likes is the phone bill.
Okay.
So if you have whatever, a phone bill is almost $2,500 a month. You want to take a percentage of that as your deduction because you're using your data, talk, text, and data.
Yep.
Use the phone. So those you kind of have to finagle with a bit. And there's in the intro tab there is instructions on how to set those up correctly before you move forward. Let's scoot down a little bit. So, okay, we'll go down to the Irs Schedules here. So these are basic. Right now, they're all negatives because we just started the year.
Mm-hmm.
They will eventually become positive after you reach a certain, break-even point past your expenses.
Mm-hmm.
I put in the car loan interest and the phone on a yearly basis just
Gotcha.
Because I'm not gonna calculate every month.
Right on. So you already put in like your yearly expenses. So obviously you're not going to be adding, to that. So as you make more money, you'll go in from negative to positive, basically.
Yes. So
okay.
Yeah, that's a good note. You drive for about a month or two. Probably past the third month, you'll start to see actual taxable income.
Okay. Cool.
And then the numbers right here will automatically filter down, and you don't even have to touch this. So the within line 44. is a little formula that you will have to edit. So a lot of people want to know, when should I start withholding tax? What should I do? And I mean, a good blanket number for most people is 15% on a federal basis for the IRS, and maybe, I don't know, I would say 10% on a state basis, just because I don't know everybody's state bracket.
Okay.
So what you would do is, based on your previous year's taxes, you want to figure out how much tax should I withhold. Now, if you have a primary W-2 job, so you can withhold taxes that way. You can increase your withholdings to take taxes out so you don't have to pay Uber tax or quarterly estimates. So you'd figure out based on how much money you're withholding from your other paycheck, and you pretty much put a little threshold number in here, and that's the 1,100 that I put in here. Okay. And if you can pretty much put in any number, and then once you reach that number of over and above that amount of tax, this will change from no to yes, meaning you probably need to withhold a little more tax.
Gotcha.
And that'll work both the same way for the state.
So basically what that number is, so you put 1,100 in there. So what that means is that once you owe more than 1,100 in taxes, you want to start withholding a little bit more. So you work a W-2 job, so you would maybe up your number over there, right?
Exactly. Okay. Harry's 100% correct there. And now if you are primarily 1099 for all of your jobs, you just may have to increase your quarterly estimate.
Exactly. So you would have to save a little more and pay a little more for your estimated taxes.
Exactly.
Okay, cool.
And it's very important that everyone knows that taxes, you're going to have to pay them. Don't skimp out. Don't be scared. Just pay them.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Okay, so this is a pretty easy tab because everything just flows through. So now we'll move to the profit and loss tab. And this is, let's wait for this to load for a second. So this is pretty much a personal view of how are you doing. You know, everybody wants to know where they stand throughout the year. So the top first, I guess it's like 6 rows, the first 12 rows, let's say, right? That's all your total earnings numbers. Everything is automatically pushed through from both the Uber and Lyft tab to there, to all those pink highlighted or bolded numbers. Excuse me. The deductions will come out automatically as well. Some veterans will see 15%, some will see 20%, some will see 25%. You know, that's just based on whenever you signed up. Newer guys will probably see 25%, as disheartening as that is. Then you will get to your net earnings number there in row 21. Okay. So that is your gross minus your total fees. So that's that's your pay before you lessen, for taxes and all that other stuff. Okay. Yeah. That's a pretty good number of how am I doing? Okay, net earnings looks good. So then we have your expenses incurred. Now these have no effect on taxes or anything else. What these are is really to measure, like I said, your overall expenses that you spent throughout the year. Right. Because people have a tendency to forget that. They say, "Oh, I'll just buy tires, whatever, $450. I'm not worried about it." But at the end of the year, how did that affect your profitability? Yeah. So those blue bolded numbers you have to kind of input yourself. Okay. So for me, the last time I changed my tires was at 25,000 miles. That's just a reference point you can use. My oil changes, same kind of thing, and my brakes. I'm more of a do-it-yourself guy. There's a couple other things you can put in here if you like, but that's my main expenses. Okay, got it. So you can add and subtract the lines in here if you like.
Right, and I think, that's a good point you made too. So obviously, that won't affect your taxes if you're taking the standard mileage rate deduction, but it's good for like kind of tracking your profit and loss because that is an expense that you're incurring because you're driving for Uber, right?
Yes, and you brought up a good point there, Harry, that my estimated tax worksheet is set up to use the standard mileage deduction. If you are not using the standard mileage deduction, you are on your own, guys, because I do not understand the depreciation aspects. It's just not.
Well, luckily, I think the standard mileage probably makes sense for about 90% plus of people. So
and that's the other. If you drive in big cities like us, like San Diego, LA, San Fran, or New York, on the coasts, the mileage, you could probably take actual deductions if you wanted to. Because, the rate of pay is pretty high and all that. We're not doing too much driving to get to where we have to go. For people in the Midwest, middle America, standard deduction makes sense just because you're going to do a hell of a lot more driving.
Okay. Cool.
Stack up.
So after you have the expenses here, it looks like you sum them up and kind of calculate your pre-tax net profit.
Mm-hmm. And then your tax will automatically come out, and you will get a net profit post-tax, and that's pretty much that's how much money you're making this year.
Awesome.
And then there is cash tips. I mean, when you get them, but nobody ever. I mean, they're not supposed to tip. So if you get them, you can enter them here. If you don't like the IRS looking at your stuff, definitely don't enter them here. Some people get nervous. So.
All right, cool. So it looks like the most important number on this sheet is that net profit down at the bottom, $15.33.
And then you'll also, in column D there, you'll get a percentage. So everybody wants to know, hey, how much, what is your number? What's your profit margin?
Yeah.
Right? What's your profit margin? So for most drivers, you start at 100%. You take Uber and Lyft take 20, 25%. So you get to right there 75.
Mm-hmm.
Then your cost of doing business should be about 5 to 7%. Here it's a little higher because all the numbers some are negative and stuff looks a little wacky.
Yeah.
So yeah, your cost of doing business between 5 and 7, your tax rate will be about 5%. Leaves you with, if you're doing about 60%, that's really good. If you're doing 65, that's amazing.
Okay, cool.
That's what I've seen so far through what everybody's, a lot of people show what they're doing.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it too. I've never really thought about thinking about your profit margin. I mean, here, basically for people who have run a business before, when they kind of calculate their profit and loss and thinking about, hey, if, when you start getting in the 40, 50, 60% expenses of your profit, you're probably, kind of running a little thin. But I think that's a good rule of thumb. Yeah. If you can be in that right around 60 to 70%, I think you're in the sweet spot. So cool. Well, awesome, man. Any other takeaways you think, or anything else you want to let people know about?
That's pretty much it. I mean, and like I said, if anybody has questions, you can contact me.
Cool. Yeah, and
best I can.
Yeah, and so I'll link to this spreadsheet in the show notes for sure. And I think that it's over on Reddit too, so people can probably hop on there and ask a question or two or something like that.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I'm definitely. You can PM me or DM me, whatever they call it, and let me know, and I'll try my best to help out. I want people to be able to understand their finances, because anybody, the barrier to entry for being a rideshare driver is zero. Anybody can sign up at any time. Yeah. But, you really want to understand what you're doing, because it is a business. I mean, we're out there, we're spending a lot of time away from families, kids, wives, whatever. Husbands, I mean, a lot of women drivers out there too,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. It's easy to get started, but it's harder to get really good and kind of understand what you're doing. So I appreciate you taking the time to, first of all, create the sheet and spend your Saturday morning going over it with me.
Well, thanks. I appreciate your time here helping me with this. Any way to get this out there so everybody can have a little bit of help, because the transparency is what makes it easier for drivers.
Awesome.
We can all see and start comparing. We can say, hey, maybe this is working, or maybe it's not.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks, Bill.
Thanks, Harry.